Take it away. This is pretty cool turnout for us, first event, which I entirely attribute to our great marketing and nothing to do with the fact that we've been locked inside for 3 years and are craving human interaction. Yeah, so okay, I changed the title. It was what I thought was a good title, Get Quacking Up and Running with DuckDB. But if you Google or if you like go to their site, you get a mouthful. Like it says, DuckDB is an in-process SQL OLAP database management system. And you're like, what the fuck does that mean? So what I want to do today is spend I still have like a little demo in the middle, like screenshots of code. So I'll spend a bit of time there, but I want to spend more time talking about like the origin story of it, which is kind of cool to help understand like why they made it. It's been, as Jonathan said, it's been all like the places where like data nerds hang out. It's getting a lot of talk and hype. So I'll try and do my best to explain like why that is. What are some of like the new things that I think it unlocks that is cool, and then you can end with like where it is today and if you should actually use it for anything. So it's relatively new. So I don't know if you've caught him say like 3 to 4 years, maybe you'll be using it. That's like generous. Databases take a long time to catch on. Like I think Snowflake, which is probably like the most popular data warehouse now, was started in like 2010 or 2011. So these things take a long time, but this is relatively new. 2019, the first version was released. I think 2018 was like they first started writing the code. It came out of this Dutch National Research Center, and it was made by these two guys. Something else came from CWI. Does anyone know who this guy is? Shout it out. Yeah, Guido. So Python came out of CWI as well, which is pretty cool. So if there's anything you take away from this presentation, Dutch people are awesome and make cool, sweet data products, and great things come from CWI. Okay, cool. Like the actual origin story. This is what I'm like. There's not a lot of writing on this. I didn't know anything about DuckDB either. Like thinking of this week, I started researching it, and from one of the presentations, this is how I gather it came about. So take it with a few asterisks. Basically, what the two founders saw was what they considered suboptimal data science workflows, and for the sake of like data science, a very overloaded term, recognize that. For the sake of this conversation, we'll call data science statistics on a MacBook. Recognize it takes many definitions, but we can all agree like data scientists work with data. Simultaneously, it's known that there's been smart people working for 50 years on relational database management systems, but funny enough, data scientists don't really use databases in their workflows for a couple of reasons. They're annoying to install, or you have to purchase them. They're time consuming to set up and maintain, and then they rely on this client server architecture, which can be clunky and slow for data transfer when they want to just like iterate quickly on things. So a typical workflow, you could have like loading CSVs or other files, or even loading from a database. But then you end up doing a bunch of stuff with data locally. So you use like pandas if you're in Python, or dplyr is the big one if you're in R, and then you do whatever sciencey stuff after that. And what's really interesting is if you look at what's actually happening in like pandas and dplyr, like people are just doing SQL-like operations with these weird APIs. dplyr actually is a pretty good API, but pandas sucks. Sorry if you like it. But so they're not doing these things well. So they none of these have optimizers built in. They create these huge intermediates, which I'll give an example of later. So they're like very memory hungry. They don't allow for out of memory computation, which is interesting. You have to like do all these other annoying things to scale them up. They're no parallelism, and then they don't scale well to large data sets. Relational databases, on the other hand, do all these things. So these researchers, kind of saw this, or this is what I gather. They saw this, and this is actually a quote. They're like, "There's a lot of money in data science. We'll be able to get like a research grant if we do something in there." So they started making DuckDB. Another fun origin story. The name it's called DuckDB because this guy had a pet duck named Wilbur. It's really cute, and Wilbur apparently has since flown away to start a duck family or something like that. The other thing that's hilarious is he like lives on a boat. So if any of your friends are like complaining about like their standing desks not working or something, like, or their work from home setup, send them a picture of this guy who's like literally making a revolutionary database with a duck flying around on a boat. So yeah, ducks are also cool. They can fly, walk, and swim. They're resilient, can live off anything. So those all make great database properties as well, which is probably another part behind the name. So it's lots of different use cases. They won't crash or die, and you can deploy them anywhere. All right, that's a bit about the background. What's the big deal? From what I gathered, I think there's 4 things, but it's like only the first one is novel, and it's that it's simple, easy to use, and deploy wherever. Like all these other things are common in databases. Like all databases are multi-threaded, they handle large data, they're fast. But the big thing is this first one is why people are so excited about this thing. And the reason is it's the first in-process OLAP database, which is a mouthful. We'll dissect what that means. It's written in C++, so it's like, I don't know about computer science, but apparently that makes it like very compatible. And you'll see as a result, there's just like client libraries for it and everything as a result of that. What's really cool on the easy use part is you're a pip install away from having like a data warehouse on your computer. So a bit more on that like first in-process OLAP. It helps to look at this like split databases this way. This like the actual, it's called database landscape. Like the actual database landscape would be like, there's so many fucking databases, but this is like a subset of which I think people will recognize. So if we start with like the left or right split, it's OLTP and OLAP. Apologies, everyone knows it already, but in case you don't, like OLTP stands for online transaction processing. So like most applications that you, like web applications or whatever you use, would use one of these data bases. They're optimized for like fast reads and writes, and they're usually pulling like a single row. So they have like row-based storage. OLAP, on the other hand, is probably what more people, I'm guessing, in this room would use. And those shift to different workloads. So instead of like reading or writing a single row, or updating one, you're often like querying an entire table and summing a column, or you're like joining together two tables. So those are entirely different workloads which require entirely different architectures so they can be fast. Because these databases on the left are really slow when you try and start to put them towards those use cases. So that's OLTP versus OLAP. And then standalone versus in process. Standalone is the one you're probably more familiar with, which is like you have either a separate process running on your computer to like host this thing, or more commonly a separate server running that like sometimes you can pay for, like Snowflake or any of the like Redshift, BigQuery. So they're somewhere else. And standalone like can be more powerful, but it's generally more annoying to set up. In some cases you have to pay for it or have these giant machines doing it. And then in process is like in the same process as your like where your other program is running. So SQLite could be running in process in Python. So nothing had fit into that upper quadrant until DuckDB came along, or don't quote me on that. There may have been other stuff, but this is like the first one that's either done it well or started to become really widely used. And what's cool about that, or part of the reason people are thinking about this, most people don't know this, but like SQLite is the world's most deployed database management system. Like you all on your phone probably have like 100 SQLite databases running as part of these different apps. And I'm not saying like DuckDB is going to be like that, but even if it's like a fraction of that, that's a really big deal. So that's why people are getting really excited about it. It's like first time you can do OLAP, but in process. So now the other thing, so it's multi-threaded by default. So Pandas, SQLite, Postgres, they're all single threaded execution, which is generally slower. So you can take advantage of all like the cores you have on your powerful laptop with DuckDB. You don't need to wrap, and then yeah, like if you ever tried like scaling pandas or anything like that, you have to use like Dask or switch to Spark, which sucks. Or you try and like hack your own multi-processing. Sorry, I need like Spark pandas here. So that makes it fast and great. Handle larger than RAM data. So if you have a data set that's like bigger than memory, you can use that with DuckDB, which is really cool. And the reason for that, there's a couple, but a big one is DuckDB is a streaming engine. So it processes everything incrementally in chunks, where it's like Pandas or dplyr, you read everything in memory and then do stuff on it. It can also do this because it can push, because the SQL optimizer can push filters down to like the IO layer. So you're not like, you don't even read in that extra data you need or those extra columns you need. A neat one I didn't know about is so it doesn't even materialize intermediate results. It's much smarter. So an example that helps illustrate this is like, say you had a SQL query that's like select a column from a table where that column plus 5 is greater than some value. Like if you were to write that in pandas, you have to make a new column that like described was a plus 5, and then you could filter on that. And that's like a waste of memory because you have to materialize this column for every single row in your table. So like this is why, another reason why I can handle larger than random data. The one thing I'll caveat is there is a potential for like, you can't just throw anything at it. There are still some things that like most, if you're familiar with like Redshift, BigQuery, Snowflake, and the other ones, like all those databases spill to disk when they run out of memory. So your thing doesn't fail. There are some operations in DuckDB that don't yet spill to disk. They're actively working on it. It's on their roadmap this year, but you can't, like your thing will break in certain cases. Like sorts do spill to disk, like your join. It's getting a bit technical to do like a hash join. Your build date, like the hash table has to fit inside of memory. So not everything will work yet. But the other thing is a heavily Bayesian-based thing, maybe a hot take, but your data is not that big. Everyone thinks they have big data, and maybe you do, but like you don't actually need to query fucking terabytes every time. Like most of the time, you're working on a smaller sample. What's really interesting, there's a guy named Jordan Tagani who made BigQuery, as like part of the founding team at BigQuery, and if you listen to him on podcasts, he'll talk about something where he'd look at like the BigQuery logs and basically saw that like most people were actually querying very small data sets most of the time. So like 90% of the time, no one's using big data. They're using like, I don't know, tens of gigabytes or around that range. So that's really interesting because it's like you actually don't need as much as you think. And then the last piece is it's fast. So because of those things I just said, also because there's none of that inter-process communication or over the network. So that's a common one, is like you have to read from a database on another server, or even if you have like they do demos where like they have Postgres or one of these things running on their laptop, it'll still be slower because like you have to call a separate process, it does everything, and then all the results come back over a socket. And then you get query optimization, which you don't get with like pandas or dplyr. Like if you put a filter further down than it should, you don't get the advantages of having a database push those up. Okay, let's see what it actually looks like. So if you want to go out and use this thing today, there's like a bunch. Remember I said it's like you can deploy anywhere because that's C++ compatibility. Like there's all these different drivers available, or these ways to use it. So there's a CLI, which will show that's really easy to use. Someone ported it into WebAssembly, which is really cool. So you can literally have DuckDB running in your browser, which seems like dumb if you think about it. It's like, why do you need that in your browser? If you think about like the use cases that unlocks is like if someone's building a web app, they can now put like a data warehouse on the customer's web app, and then it just has to query data, and you're not like bottlenecked on your backend servers doing all that. So I think like that will be a thing eventually. It's early. Python R, obviously. There's a Java like ODBC driver. So like something that was cool that I set up is anyone use DataGrip? It's like a SQL IDE. So there's like a ODBC driver for DataGrip. So I can have DuckDB in my DataGrip, so it's running on my laptop, and I can just query like CSV files with that there. And then there's all these other languages I don't use, but you could use with DuckDB. Okay, this is cool. So this is my terminal, and this is just the CLI I've installed. And I'm running a SQL query on a CSV file on my, just in the terminal. It's pretty neat. And you just get the results spit out there. You can do the exact same thing in Python. So there's like, it's one import. So you just pip install it. Then you can write a SQL query and run it, and it runs on your laptop. So again, I'm querying that same CSV file on my computer. That's the output, which I recognize looks kind of ugly, but you can also like just push it into a pandas data frame. So they play really well together. So here's an example where I have like a pandas data frame, And then if you look, like my from is a data frame. So you're running SQL against the pandas data frame. And then this 2DF is like what spits out a data frame at the end. And you can see the output of that down there. And what's really cool about this is it's like it's not making like a copy of it in memory. Have people heard of Apache Arrow? So this is like this new technology that's meant to like make, I'm gonna butcher this, like sharing data between applications much better, or between processes, I should say. And so this uses Arrow under the hood to prevent like creating copies of the data, which is neat. Then you can also use this to query remote data. So you could, instead of pointing this to a file on your laptop, you could point it to a file in your S3 bucket or your data lake, as they call it. So that's pretty neat. And then you can so you can read from a bunch of different types of files and then write to a bunch of different types of files. So here's like to run a SQL query, pipe the results back out to a Parquet file on disk. They have really awesome SQL syntax for the SQL lovers out there. These are straight from this article, so you should just go read this article after. So this one is you can use an alias, Star Wars theme. You can use column aliases and a where clause, which is really neat. Like, I don't know if you've run into this before, where you like define a column and then you have to use it in a separate CTE. You can just filter on nope equals 1 there, which is neat. Group by all and order by all is sick. Because if you've done like the group by 1 or group by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you're like, fuck, I don't need like 4 anymore, and you like take that out. You just group by all, order by all, and it's all there. What was this one? Oh, like if you've ever created like structs and arrays are really clunky in SQL, but all the databases support them now. So they have really nice syntax for making these. So this like looks like a Python dictionary, and it's like creating a struct in SQL, and then this is looks like a list, and it's creating an array in SQL. Oh yeah, see the trailing comma? Trailing comma is supported. Then you can do like cool indexing like you would in Python, and you can do this with strings as well. So you can like take substrings using that like you would with Python. Okay, so it's like cool SQL. Like I already have a database. What does this unlock? So I think there's a couple things. These are my takes. One is like I don't think pandas will disappear, but I think this will replace take on a lot of things you would do in pandas, and you'll just do it in DuckDB, because it's like everyone knows SQL. It's way easier. It's easy to read. And it's just way faster. So I think that's one big thing. Another one is better data pipelines. So in my first at the first company I worked for, Capital One, it was a credit card company, and we had all these risk models that would run on all our customer accounts. So hope I don't get sued for saying this, but like, so you guys all have credit cards. Like the good companies are like looking at like all your data and continually getting an updated read on how risky you are as a customer, and you can use that to make decisions like, should I give this person more credit if they ask for it, or should I send them an offer for a better credit card? So we have these data pipelines, or we have these pipelines built to do this like continuous scoring of customer risk profiles. And how these were built, so the first one that we had was like, we did a data pull from Redshift, and then we would do all our like feature preparation and like most of our data munging in Pandas, and then you would do your model scoring. And the reason we did that, like you could push it all into Redshift, but that's very hard to test. And like you're making like underwriting or like loan decisions on that, you want to be like sure as hell that's working the way you think should be. So you want to unit test it. And I don't know if you've tried unit testing SQL, it's really hard. So we pushed all this into Pandas and did our whole pipeline there, which was like clunky. We spent a lot of time trying to get like good performance out of Pandas on these massive data sets. And then the second version of this was like we kind of shifted from like, it's risky to pull from a database because you like, what if the DBA or the analytics engineer like changes a column and their model's fucked up. So we started going further up to source, where instead of pulling from the data, you pull from the files directly in the cloud. And now I'm working with like all these files. So I'd use, have people heard of Dask? It's like a way to scale like pandas, or even just like, you want to just do like scaled Python and across like cores or more machines. It's a really nice way to do it, but it's still like annoying. and then you'd have the pandas thing. So, you know, if current Ian could go back to the past, I could just take DuckDB and do all of that in DuckDB, still get the advantages of like being able to unit test it because you just have Python objects going around, but you have all that done more efficiently. So I think that's another cool use case for it. And then better data apps. So there's one really cool company that's like just popping up called like Real Data, and they're like entirely built on DuckDB. And I don't know if this GIF will go all the way through, but if like you should go like just look at their product app or maybe on Twitter, and they have some really cool demos. And they can just get incredibly interactive with data sets because it's so freaking fast to query them. And like if you, I don't know if it'll get to this in the GIF, but like if they like write SQL, just like automatically compile. So it's a really cool experience. You're starting to see some cool products get built out of this. Another like two other really cool products that fall in a similar category are like way better notebooks. So DeepNote and Hex are two really cool companies that are making much better interactive notebooks. And so what they let you do is like blend languages, like you switch easily back and forth between like SQL and Python. I don't know if they support R. Alan from DeepNote is here. You can ask him later. But an example here, sorry if this is hard to see, but like over here you have like a SQL query being run on a CSV file. So that's DuckDB under the hood. So you're starting to see companies like embed this into their actual applications. And then Hex, as an example here, we have like a query running a BigQuery. The cells get saved as like data frames. And then you can see downstream, it's querying that pandas data frame. You do the same thing in DeepNote. So again, all that's powered by DuckDB, the kind of zero copy clone thing I was talking about, which is really cool. Something I think will be cool is like building better, so I think a lot of apps have like analytics sections in them that will like present customers like data back to them. So we did this at Shopify, and typically how this works is like you have to hit a web server, and then that has to go and talk to a database, and then maybe that goes to storage and gets the stuff, and then it's slow. Like the customer is sitting on the end with a loading GIF. So what's really cool is you can just swap out that data warehouse and you just stick that on your web server. So if you have like a Python web server, you just put DuckDB on it, and that gets rid of a round trip. So you could, in theory, get like much snappier, cooler experiences on your product. And then the one that's like the biggest stretch, but I like don't think it's that big of a stretch, or let's take time, is like a new hyper efficient, cost effective data warehouse. How many people use Snowflake? Yeah. So if for those who don't, like Snowflake has warehouses you pick, which are like your compute clusters, and they use t-shirt sizes. So a lot of the time people just need like a small or even an extra small. Everyone essentially has, I think a small is like 32 gigs of RAM and 16 cores. So maybe it's more like an extra small, but like everyone basically has one of these on their laptop. And like I said before, like 90% of queries don't use big data. So you could shift 90% of these workloads to people's laptop, and everyone just gets their own data warehouse, which is pretty neat. And then what you could do, or what you would need to do, because you still do have those occasional cases that need to like scale up to a much larger data set, is you could have like push those things to like a server on the back end. So this is something I think that is like very much in the realm of possibility. There's a company called MotherDuck that like I think is going to do this. I'm not 100% sure. They have like an all-star team, which is really cool. The guy who made BigQuery there, like they have all these really smart people there. So like something cool could come out of there, but we'll see. Cool. So like, should you actually use this? I think 3 of those 4 use cases I talked about are like actually very practical. So like the bye-bye pandas are like better local development or better like data processing on your machine. Like you can absolutely do that today. Better data pipelines. I'll caveat this, like if you have a data warehouse today and you're doing like DBT in that already, like don't switch, that's great. Like, but for some of the stuff where you're like shoving stuff into pandas and like doing a bunch of operations in pandas, like get rid of that, use or swap in DuckDB for those heavier things. The better data apps, like I think you could build that web app thing I talked about today, and you've already seen like companies are using this and embedding it in their apps today, which is really cool. But just keep in mind that like you can't just throw anything at it. You have to be careful with like how much data you're processing. And then yeah, like the The new data warehouse thing is probably a ways out because there's like all these things you need in a data warehouse, like caching, user and permission management, being able to like scale it up and down, scale the disks when your queries run out of memory. Like all those things aren't there yet, but they'll come. So keep your eye on it. And yeah, there's a bunch of, we'll probably share, I'll share these slides out after, but pretty much everything I learned was from all these things. There's some really good videos. And yeah, some blog posts you can check out. And I encourage you to just try it. Like I said, it's like a pip install. So it's really easy. And like next time you have a CSV, don't like bang your head against the wall trying to like load it into your data warehouse. Just try using DuckDB to query it. It's pretty sweet. Yeah, do we want to do questions or do that after? Sweet. Yeah, everything.
Are there any like current
oh God, that's a little like, I don't think so, but maybe. I don't have the knowledge to know like, will there be like some technical hurdle in the future that will like prevent them? Like, as I mentioned, right now you can't do like the part of the join has to fit entirely in memory. So like that is definitely a limitation right now where if your join is too big, it will just die, which is like admittedly a frustrating experience. But yeah, there may be, I don't know, but yeah. Someone else over here.
Is there any startup time?
Yeah, so it will be like, it'll still be, I don't know if it's like faster than Pandas for reading a CSV, you'll still have that time. They do, so I didn't show in these examples, like there's actually two ways to use it. One is like this one I showed where you just like literally query a CSV file. But if you're familiar with SQLite, like they have a single database file. DuckDB has the same thing. So if you want to get faster performance for those, if you like load the CSV into the database as like a one-time thing, it like puts it in its native format, and then all the future queries on it are like stupid fast. But like it's really quick. Like the Parquet reader they built from scratch. That's like another cool like nerdy thing about their thing is it's like, I think it's 10 megabytes. They have no external dependencies, which is like pretty nuts to think about if you ever like written software. Think about like how many things you import at the top. They have like none of that. They just built it all. So they have their own Parquet reader really fast. Sorry?
It's all straight.
Yeah, well, you still can but like most of the time you won't. Yeah. It's when like if an operation requires a bunch of stuff to be in memory, like if you do a group by, all the like things you're grouping on have to eventually fit in memory, for example. But yeah, usually that's not that big. Yeah.
You mentioned that data science is statistics on a lab. I was wondering like what DuckDB give us advanced statistics that kind of factoring.
No, you'd still do like maybe one day, but I don't think so. Like SQL, like building an RDBMS, whatever, is in itself such a tall task, and there's already libraries that do all that stuff really well. It's targeting like the SQL like operations that the other libraries are doing. That's what it's going after. So you'd still use your like scikit-learn, blah blah blah, deep learning, blah blah blah. Oh, I don't do any of that. I don't know. Whatever the kids are using these days, you'd still use that, your regular packages for that after. Cool. Thanks. Yeah, you should check it out. It's pretty cool. Jason. All right, you're up.
Okay, so do I sound here to get recorded? Okay.
There is a camp right here, yeah. So try to stay in that.
Okay, cool. Turn it off. Okay, so sorry, I don't have slides. Originally, I thought we are gonna have like maybe 10, 12 people here, talk about data.
Sorry.
Then I went on a camping trip and I came back and I saw that we had 70 people coming. So the talk hasn't really changed though. So for background, I'm Jason. I'm at a company called Ascent. We do compliance and regulatory stuff. Kind of boring, not really relevant to the topic at hand. Really, the topic is how do you go from a service org to a platform org? And that is like really, really cool. So we managed to do that over the last year and a half at our company, because you read about it all the time, right? It's like, oh, data is a product here, data is a product there, like blah, blah, blah. And people talk about it, and not many companies seem to manage to pull it off, because I've tried doing it at one and it failed miserably. So like this is not a very easy thing to do executionally, but people hear about it, we daydream about it, especially if you're at a company that is a service org. So before we like dive too much deeper. So when I say like a service org, you're at a company that almost treats you as an IT area where, hey, I need a report. You need to make it for me. More people have reports and you make more. Now, as people start dogpiling this on, you have no time to fix reports, maintain reports, start working on other things. And then all of a sudden you're overwhelmed. You have too many data pipelines to maintain. Things are breaking and everyone's like, hey, your data's pretty bad. Like, why can't you do it better? So we're trying to avoid that. So that's kind of what like a service org is. And that is the kind of inevitable fate of them normally, especially if it's tied to data. Because your service org will never grow faster than the amount of data your company will have, ever. It's probably safe to say that's not possible, right? It's the age of data. Data is going exponential. You're not going to catch up with it by throwing people on it. And if you are, great. That's a money problem, and that's a problem you can solve. Wonderful. You don't need to be here to throw more money at it. And when I'm talking about platform team, it is self-serve. So I steer away from calling it self-serve, because self-serve has this weird kind of connotation to it. Everyone has heard about self-serve BI, right? Like that has been a thing. Apparently it's been self-serve for the last 10 years. I don't really think that's the case though, right? Like it's not really self-serve. There's a lot of work that goes into it. So, you know, making a platform really acknowledges that, hey, a lot of times people don't even want self-serve BI. They want a CSV, right? Give them the damn CSV, let them go and they'll do their thing. It's wonderful. But a lot of times you do need to help clean and manufacture data, get the pipelines going to make sure it's really, really usable, right? And if you can consistently do it in a way that that data is reliable and usable, it could be a Google Sheet. That is your data platform. Now, it's not like Snowflake, but it is a data platform, right? Your finance team probably operates in a very, very similar model. A super lean team, they spend countless hours cleaning, munging, getting the data in a pristine, super big wide table. And then they build a lot of stuff on top of it. So clearly it works. I don't know why more engineering teams don't do it, but we just don't. And that's okay. So that's kind of why we're here today. And this is Michelle. She's from Snowflake.
I was really worried you were going to intro me, and I'm like, oh, I'll just.
So Michelle, she's from Snowflake, and she's our partner at Ascent. They help out a lot in helping us get to our goal of getting ourselves onto a data platform.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, so I guess we wanted to make this more of a dialogue. You know, I've met Jason a couple times, so I kind of understand where his journey has come from and where it's going. So if you're comfortable, we're going to do some Q&A, and you guys are welcome to chime in with any questions. But ultimately, yeah, shall we start?
Sure.
Okay, so I don't know if everyone knows what Ascent does. So maybe you can start off with a little intro with the company and what your role is.
That's a good point. So Ascent is a compliance company. So we actually are a supply chain data company. We deal in the durable hard goods. So stuff you've never heard about, like the little pieces of metal and the chemical compounds that probably go into your computer chips, you know, components for your cars. We deal a lot with medical goods as well. Because at the end of the day, like all that stuff comes from somewhere. So when you think of supply chain, you normally think, I'm buying a bottle of Coke. It has a bottle, it has this liquid called Coke. Okay, great, that's my supply chain. But if you keep on going deeper and deeper, there are some chemicals in Coke, and the plastic is coming from somewhere, right? Plastic is molded somewhere, there are compounds in there. So we go really deep down the supply chain, out of the digital space into the analog space. Because supply chain is actually pretty easy if it's all digitalized, right? Everything is categorized, it's in a database somewhere, it's somewhat clean. But we go well beyond that into an analog space where some of these compounds and components are probably coming from a small mom and pop shop in India where they don't have a computer. So they're just like writing down ingredients on a notepad, and someone from our company is probably calling them and trying to figure out, hey, is this actually compliant? Like, is this going to give us cancer? Like California has that Prop 65, I believe. Some people joke about it a lot, right? Everything gives you cancer. So our company ensures that, hey, does this thing actually give you cancer or not, right? Like you don't want to go around scaring people. So that's what we really do. And I'm a data engineer there at Ascent. So I started as our first data engineer. I think we had one other engineer on the business side outside of the product when I joined, and they were on the marketing team. So that's kind of how it started. And in the last year and a half, we pulled off the transition successfully. So now we have a full data organization. We have a chief data officer, right? We have our VP of enterprise data and IT and security. We have governance and that stuff rolled in, right? Because if you're kind of maturing up, you also need all that stuff to come hand in hand, right? We have a director, we have a full team. It's great. We have a full team in a year and a half, and it's like wonderful. We have executive buy-in, right? We have a budget. It's great. We're not just like some rogue team on the side. But please give us some money so we can do something. Like I need some compute power.
Okay, so if we step back a bit from the year and a half that you started, I guess as a startup, are there specific challenges that you have to keep in mind as you're trying to move from a services org to more of a data platform organization?
There are some hard realities on this one. So if you're in a startup that doesn't have a lot of runway, probably want to stay away from this, right? You want to derive like a lot of short-term good value impact and analysis to them and get them to the point where they can do this, right? But the other thing is there are like key requirements, right? Like, do you have the ability to buy this or buy any kind of tool, right? We can be agnostic, right? It could be in Google Sheets. Do you have the ability to buy anything instead of building it, right? Do you have the air cover and the influence? This is not a technical problem, right? Going from a service to a platform org is very tactical in a non-technical fashion. You need to really have relationships in the company. You need to learn how to sell to your executives. And if you don't have this kind of baseline, that's fine. Just start spending the first few months building relationships with people, right? Start building in a very service-oriented manner, small little data like products for people to build that trust. Because generally service teams do have this kind of stigma where a lot of the data is kind of useless and people don't trust it, right? They'll take your data and say, thank you. And then they'll do their own analysis on it because they don't trust it, right? You really want to build relationships where that does not happen. Like very, 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 very important. And you also need to have a really, really good use case, right? Again, I come from more startups. So there is a state in startups where you don't work on a hair on fire problem. Similar to that, you want to start with a very hair on fire problem, right? Because if you're trying to build a data platform, you need to spend more time building than delivering, right? A lot of times. So yes, you can choose milestones to deliver upon. That means your goal and like first project has to be somewhat important in that if you can pull it off, it was well worth the bet. And if it fails, that's okay, because it was a really good bet. But it can't be too big. Like, it can't be like a 5-year project, because like that's like kind of unrealistic, but probably something between 6 months to a year, right? If your company doesn't have a good handle on what a customer is, that's probably a really good first project, right? Or if your company doesn't have a good idea of what churn is, like finance might have an idea of churn, but does your churn data actually incorporate your product usage data in a reliable way that could be programmatically done and like build it into with like dashboarding or any kind of BI capabilities? Like those are really, really good use cases and super valuable because you want to get this kind of executive buy-in that will allow you to kind of push further and solve their problems because they have bigger problems, right? Like again, it's not like a money problem that you're trying to solve for. You're trying to solve for like a people problem and broken processes problem. So those are really, really great places to start. And then you can start choosing that as your first project.
So can you give me an example of what your key project was where you were able to get that executive buy-in, that budget, so you can actually build a platform in a sense?
So we needed to do customer health. We had no idea. Well, I mean, we had an idea, right? We found a lot of tools and they all told us what the customer health was. And we asked our CSMs, because I'm pretty sure you've all probably worked in some environments where sentiment is important and it's true, super important, but it really shouldn't make up the whole thing. And we needed a more realistic way to look at all our customers across our whole band of, I'm gonna say customers again, but we call customers a very unique thing in our company because we're in the supply chain space. Customers is not a very straightforward entity like it would be at most companies, right? They're not just buying stuff from us, because if you're in the supply chain, pretend you're 3M, right? If you're our customer, you also have suppliers giving components to 3M. They might be our customers too. And then it goes all the way down. So then our customers might be giving information as a supplier to another customer. And we also have professional services. So now we potentially have a customer who is also a supplier, also has our professional services. And we might be marketing other services and products to them because we're a slightly larger company, right? So we have more than one product line. So now there's almost 4 or 5 ways we can interface with our customer. And you need to be really, really careful because if you have a great engagement with professional services, they love your tool, they love your product, they're renewing, they're super happy, but your marketing team is spamming them nonstop, or because they're a supplier, we're sending you, like 40,000 emails every month to try to get some information on whether something gives you cancer. You're probably going to be annoyed at us, and we're not going to really know it. And until you merge all that information together, it's really hard to get a nice lens on it, right? That's kind of what we started with. And it was longer than intended. We thought it would take us like maybe 8 months. It took a year and a half. But, well, not a year and a half. It took a year, but we got there in the end, and it's delivering value now. So teams can start seeing a lot of visibility into this, and you can start doing a lot of directional and very pinpointed decision-making from executive teams and directors. So now it's like very tactical and very usable. It's not being built and dying off in the ditch somewhere.
So how are you making sure that there's certain products that are succeeding and you're really running with that versus products that maybe aren't being used? How are you testing that and iterating on that and making sure that you're sunsetting the right tools?
So sunsetting tools, I'll touch on that really quickly first. The key thing also when you're transitioning from service to a product, you need to communicate to people that you're taking their dashboard away. Yeah. This is like a wild concept to some people, right? But the moment you reveal to them, hey, that thing you said that was like super, super important to you, and you need it like today, okay, if it's that important to make one decision today, it means I can take it away in a month, right? That's when you start getting pushback and you can start discovering what they really need and want from what you're trying to deliver to them. Because a lot of times there's a mismatch, right? They say something, it's kind of your job to really suss out what they mean and want. So sunsetting kind of prompts it as a conversation, which is really, really important. It also touches on maintenance too, right? Because you can't just release a dashboard and then go build something else and leave a wake of destruction behind you. Like there has to be some way to maintain it. And if you can't maintain it, that's why you have to sunset it. You have to justify the maintenance, otherwise you take it away. Ian.
I'm curious. So can you cover like what the before and the after? So I guess the before is I would come to you and I say, hey, can you create this dashboard?
It was even better. We had nothing before. Like when I joined, they didn't know what a data warehouse was. It was great.
But so okay, what is the before and what is the after? How do I engage? Like let's say I'm a head marketing sale. How do I engage out?
So in the before world, people would just talk to each other until enough people kind of like mentioned it, and someone said, "Hey, we should do something." And then they would find people who are capable of doing it. And that's kind of how it would start. So the service org I was part of, we called it the IBO, internal business processes. But essentially, it really was a recycling bin of problems. So we used to kind of joke, like, that's where you go dump your problems so you can't solve it. Like you're frustrated, you maybe spend a few months at it, you work with a few teams, you can't solve it, give it to the IBO. They'll solve it for you. And we did. And it was really, really fun. But it's not really sustainable, right? Like this is not a long-term situation, especially if you're only working on the super hairy and complex problems. So now afterwards, we have a data product manager. So that was really, really key. A lot of times you hear the first hire should be like an engineer. In our case, after we had 2 engineers, we're like, okay, we need a data product manager. Because if we're going to do this properly, we need people to be building the data products, maintaining the data products, and also doing intake, right? So you don't want your engineers to be spending too much time doing intake. And we also need to maintain relationships, right? A lot of the times, unless you're a senior engineer, you're not going to be out there talking to your chief marketing officer too often. And even if you are, you don't want to be the one trying to help refine the intake of the problems that they're really working on. And you can't just say, oh, I'm too busy, or like, it's not worth talking to. That's not a really good approach. So you want a data product manager. But in lieu of that, you probably want to get an engineer on your team that likes talking to people and just getting them to listen. Like, it is a thing, right? And that's all you can really do. There's no silver bullet to it. Because most of the engineers that really, really like talking to people, they're kind of like Michelle. They don't become like sales engineers, right? So they just like leave the whole like development work completely. But there probably are a few people there who like it and enjoy refining problems. So just give it to whoever has an affinity to it and just call it a day, right? Like you don't have to over-engineer it. Because at the end of the day, companies have unlimited problems to solve, always. And they're normally quite fun to solve and quite juicy too. So it's really your job to find the best one because you are limited by time, right? Like as an engineering org and as a team, you only have so many hours. So you really, really want to make sure you're focusing on the things that really, really matter. Making a dashboard for someone might be cool, but like there's a threshold, right? So even now as a team, if our work doesn't impact at minimum 80 something odd people, we're not going to do it, right? Because like those smaller day-to-day, like one-up dashboards, they probably should be made internally and handled by their own independent teams for like a day-to-day kind of like ongoing basis operational stuff. So we'll help educate and train those analysts, but we're not going to be the ones making those anymore because it's not worth it if you're trading time against building something that impacts, let's say, 150 people. Yeah?
Yeah, just curious if a platform is a product roadmap or like, yeah, it just turning into a platform now, product is just.
A little bit of both. So when I joined the company, I kind of sold them on the idea of it. I was like, hey, you guys need a data warehouse. Because they're like, oh, what's that? I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. Let's get you a data warehouse and then start from there. So after I joined the company, I did hear that our product side was trying to build a data warehouse internally too. But I thought that was kind of weird because like the product side, how you handle and treat data is fundamentally different than how you would if you're on the business side, right? The product is a transactional database landscape. You really want to make sure data lands somewhere. That's your really, like that is your main concern. You don't care too much about a view and how you would roll up and aggregate and kind of access the data afterwards. Like your job is to land the data, make sure it shows up there, is accurate and reliable. So, you know, tacking on this weird tertiary kind of like requirement is a little strange. It's never going to be priority number one. So that's kind of the approach I kind of took when I went in. I was like, guys, that's probably not going to be the priority. They confirmed it. They're like, yeah, this is like something we always wanted to do because it made sense. There's data here. I'm like, great, okay, cool. So I'll just continue building that.
And then as a follow-up to that, then how much did transforming to a platform over processes?
Okay, so our company is like fairly mature, right? Like when I joined, we already raised a Series C, like maybe 2 years after they raised their Series C, I joined. So our product org is very, very mature, right? Like please don't misunderstand. Like we have a very mature, great product team, really smart people. But you know, access to that data was really, really hard because they really constructed that product and that data ecosystem to live in that product and, you know, a developer bubble. So the moment you have to pull things out, that's when it started breaking. So for instance, if you're a customer, right, and you put a support ticket in to a professional services team, now that ticket gets handled outside of the actual product. So now everything goes haywire.
Yeah.
So that's why things are improving. So we're releasing data products to not only make our lives easier on the business side, but we've also made data products that help bridge the business and the actual product, right? Because they speak different languages essentially.
Yeah, because I mean, personally, I'm more on the business side, the data, the company side. So I guess I'm curious, like, how much is that business side?
Oh yeah, it did. Because our product, they knew what a customer was in their view, right? Because if you're in the product side, you're gonna have a very opinionated view, and everyone conforms to that. But when you're on the business side, there's like too many departments. There's no real unity there. So a customer to our developers with like a database ID, right, or organization ID. But if you're on the business side, let's say you work with Salesforce, if you're working on more complex clients that might have a hierarchy to it, right, you might be selling to 3M and their subsidiaries, and then their subsidiaries, right? So where does that belong, right? Like, what is the actual customer in that case?
Yeah.
Because to the databases, right, and the product, it's whatever ID you assign them, right? Every subsidiary obviously is a customer. Well, on the business side, if you talk to the account teams and the finance people, contractually, we have one customer, it's 3M, right? We have one customer because that's what we report to the board for financial reasons. So who's right, right? Like you start getting to that war. Yeah, so we decided you're both right. We'll just add a transactional, a translation bridge, almost like a Rosetta Stone, so you can at least understand where the other side is coming from. Because a lot of times, like in your own data domain, you are correct. The moment you start branching out and working with other people, you're incorrect because everything's built in a silo. People love silos. I love silos. No one bugs you. It's great. Like everything works as intended. But once you break out of the silo, it starts like falling apart.
So originally it was like just this sole function and just for building stuff, running with these customers, but even act more as a bridge between your customers and their clients to improve your product and improve the service with them.
No, dude, it was literally to figure out who our customers were.
Yeah.
Like, because like our notion of what a customer was made sense to our product people. To our business people, they're like, oh, you know, like this is the customer. They're like, no, this is database name ABC, and you're like, this doesn't make sense to our business people. Like our accounting doesn't know what this means. Like how are you going to help our CSMs renew a contract if all you can tell them is, well, this database had these performance metrics, right? What does that mean, like actionable, right? If you're trying to renew this account, you're trying to see if people are doing healthy activity, like how could you tell with just a bunch of random database things that you have no context, right? Like it's data, it's product data. People say that's really useful, but once you do something to it and make it usable by your end users, it's completely useless, right? So it's a weird balance.
Any more questions? You like, I think a lot of the teams like hammered with like that. Found a good way to like, and so some of them like do need to get done. You found a good way to like balance those with like.
Oh, that's easy. So this is where like, you know, like that's actually the easiest part, right? Before you begin, like I said in the beginning, you need to actually make sure you have all your ducks in a row. Like you need to understand like who your stakeholders are and how much air cover you can get, right? Because transitioning from service to platform is not a technical problem. Like it doesn't matter. Like your technical ability is a commodity at this point. That is not like, no matter how good you technically execute, it's not going to really push the needle on you like transferring to a platform team, right? It's how you help manage and provide value to the people who are involved. So imagine this, right? Like you have this super pressing request, right? And I say, hey, the chief revenue officer has us work on this forecasting thing. If you want me to work on it, that's cool, because you said super important. I trust you. Just please give me some reason why it's more important than like this, right? And that's when you force people to really think about the problem, because a lot of times it's knee-jerk and they don't really understand the work that goes behind it. So if you really force them to make it concise, it's like that old adage of like, hey, this meeting could have been an email. Okay, make them like, force them to make that request into an email basically, right? So they understand what they're asking, and then that gives you a chance to go back to them and say, hey, what you're asking for, you know, we don't have resources for it, or maybe you don't have resources for it, because we need you to help provide us data. We need you to have like a data steward, right? We need you to give us, we need you to help us QA this. And a lot of times people go like, oh shit, I didn't think we needed help QA this. You're just gonna like, give it to us. I'm like, oh no, that's not really how it works for like your typical use case. So it's honestly really easy because you have these big meaty problems, right? Especially if you're in the process or starting to transition to a data platform. Like the data platform is very, very key as a company. Especially if you're in startups or a more stable company, like this is kind of your gold record. So to disturb work on this, it should be a really good reason, like landing some kind of mega whale like customer, right? Like if this customer is gonna like make the quarter, sure, let's like drop everything and like get it done, right? Or if we have board requirements, or like board reporting requirements that we need to kind of last minute do, sure, whatever, like that has to get done. But you really need a good reason. It can't just be like, well, we thought like we might, you know, find something here. Okay, cool.
So if you like you're a team, you don't have something like the chief revenue officer working on. Like I got the general piece of advice, be like, go find those big projects with buy-in, like higher ups.
You need to
care about it, so you can use that as like
Yeah, you don't have to go all the way up, right? If you think about like you at the company, your sphere of influence, as long as your manager and your manager's manager can help navigate and point you to the people you need to talk to, you should roughly get enough buy-in. And you also, you're partnering with these people. So you need to build relationships with them. Because at the end of the day, like they need to trust you and your data. So we're assuming that your data is trustable, but like they need to perceive that they could trust you. And unless you've actually delivered a lot of stuff to them where data was accurate, your expectations were managed and it was timely, then you're gonna have a really hard time. Which is why like sunsetting data products is super important. Because you normally intend that like, let's say dashboard or report to live for a very short amount of time because it's really a window into how the company is doing at that moment. But a lot of times people just take that and build new stuff on it and then use it maybe like 3 or 4 months later and go like, wow, this is shit. Like the data's all wrong. And they'll go back to you and you're like, what are you doing? Right? So if you're careful about managing expectations early, you'll get that like trust and buy-in to work on these like larger projects that perfectly they want people to work on. They just don't know who to ask.
What makes a good data PM, and what would you look for when hiring?
Oh, I could get along with
Asking for a friend.
Yeah, no, like kind of to get along with them because a lot of people complain, oh, PMs are kind of shit because like there should be some natural tension and conflict there, right? But the good ones, like they get it. Like they get that data should be a product. If your PM or the people you're talking to don't align with the idea of data as a product, that's totally cool. That's fine, right? It probably works in whatever environment they're in. But for your environment, you actually need it to be data as a product because they need to communicate the status of these products that are living, right? Give like versioning updates, take in feedback on how it's doing. Like they need to like really get it. And if they get it, then it's fine. Everything else is right? Like they have to like talking about the other products too. At the end of the day, like the requirements aren't really high. Like you just need to get that data has to be a product. They can communicate. You're probably technical, and you think you guys can get along and have healthy tension. Because they need to push back on your recommendations, and you have to push back on theirs. Like a healthy environment where it's not, contentious. Because they're on the same team. But they're trying to be the voice of their customer sometimes, whereas you're trying to be the voice of your team, trying to make sure that they're not doing work that's really unnecessary. Oh, and they have to be okay at being young, or like at least under fire, because the first few data products you give to the company, if they've never had any, there's going to be a lot of tension around it, a lot of eyes on it, and there's going to be conflict because no matter what, once they start seeing that it's actually possible, requirements are going to start piling on. And then you find out, oh, this is actually not usable unless I have that. I didn't tell you about that because I didn't think you guys were even going to get this far. And that happens quite often, especially when you work at newer teams. So you need to make sure your PM is okay with that. And then like you wouldn't dunking it along because you will expect that to happen. Pick a good fun person. That's what it's like. Here. Yeah. Oh, you. There.
So you mentioned it's transition for people with that problem that I totally appreciate. Speak a little bit to change management that you had to go through. Was that something that you and your team took on, or did you bring other parts of the organization to help go?
We did it ourselves initially. So there were like some kind of like key inflection points, right? Like in the beginning, it was still very service, but now we begun very selectively choosing projects in a particular area that we thought we could get like stakeholder buy-in, right? And then after that happened, we had trust built up, and we kept on increasing the amount of no's that we were telling people to do. And again, it wasn't too hard because we're like, hey, we're actually working a lot with this guy. Like these are super important. If you think it's more important, that's fine. Like just write it up in an email to me or talk to him yourself and get him to pause this project, right? And that normally really stops people. So that gives you a little more time. And as you continue to build up more trust, deliver a few more products, now it's kind of easier because now you can have a special intake process, right? Now people used to say no. We implemented a really, really like quick and dirty Google Forms intake process. So then once people were used to saying no to another person, we were able to do it via Google Form, right? So now we had an intake process. You could kind of voice your complaints because it's not like we're trying to say no to everything, right? Like to be clear, like they need to understand that we still look at it, but obviously some things are not as high as a priority, but we do see it, right? So we need to also show to the people who are asking us problems and questions that we do see it and we acknowledge it. Like, yes, it's a problem. We'll put it in a backlog and we'll acknowledge that this backlog does not get turned into a freezer. Like, we will look at it and prune it occasionally and just give you some updates saying, hey, look, this is not as important. But the fun thing is, if you're actually successful in like building components on your data platform, a lot of those problems get solved by the actual platform, right? So then if you notice some of these things are being solved on things that are either roadmapped for your data platform, now you can kind of link them and communicate, hey, like that problem, hopefully it's not still a problem, but if it is, it's part of the data platform and on the roadmap now. So you might have an answer to that in like 3 to 6 months. Yeah.
So let's say the platform and you want some analysts on the team, either old fashioned
and their community. So what are the efficient ways I find to educate them on how to use this platform?
Okay, so I have like the easy answer and then like the more standard answer. The easy answer is you just hire the people you've worked with before at other companies to come join you. And that is actually what we did, right? So we partnered with our revenue operations side, and they didn't have a really, really strong analyst that was super data minded. So I just asked a friend who was at another company, I'm like, hey, you want to come work with us and just be like an embedded kind of like data analyst, kind of data engineer kind of role? And he was like, hell yeah. So that's the easy way. And then the hard way is you actually need to slowly find champions and people in these orgs that have this kind of affinity to data and then purposely and mindfully train them all, right? Because the easy thing always seriously is just hire someone, right? But if you can't, let's say, you know, in the current situation, hiring freezes are around, or like you don't have any more senior headcount, that's still fine. You can take someone who's more junior on those teams and see if they have an affinity for it, right? Like when they think and talk about dashboards with you, do they ever think about maintenance? Because it's not hard to find people who want to make dashboards. Very few people get that you should probably maintain a dashboard, check on its usage, see if you can sunset it. If they resonate with that, they have good potential. Because everything else, like the technical stuff around that is not overly hard, right? They can learn SQL, even like a few months or whatever, they'll be up to speed on that, right? They'll be able to do really like basic Python and scripting. But that kind of mindset and understanding that, hey, these are like data, they should be treated as products, and you're comfortable giving pushback to people when they try to treat you as a service org, that's really all you do. Because the technical part is a commodity. You can always train or find someone who can do it, but that mindset is not something you can just get off the shelf. Like either they have it, or they've worked in an environment that has it, or that person is slowly starting to kind of work that into their thinking, but you can't really force that. At best, you give them a good environment for that. Oh, or you can recruit people, recruit people internally at your company too, because that works really, really well. We thought we would spend like 3 or 4 months hiring data engineers. We filled all of those like 2 or 3 days. It was really, really easy. But again, like you have to really let people know around the org that you're building a data platform and like be very, very, very clear about what you guys are doing. Sometimes we use the saying that we are the honest broker. Because if you are trying to build something and work on a big problem, you are normally working with multiple departments and you need to be like the honest broker. You can't lie. You need to just call things as they are to make sure that the project gets done.
The way you say no to people, you have this like Google intake form. They essentially have a place in line with them. If they're gonna lie, you sort of push them to the end and request it.
We just treat it like a sprint backlog, right? So we do run our data team like a software engineering team, like very, very similar to that. But we don't, like again, we don't ever want it to be where like these intakes are just like the start. Because some places do that, right? It's a nice way to like let them feel like they're being heard, and then you just like speak underneath. It's convenient, but like we cannot ever let that happen. To the point where we were also thinking about just visualize, like allowing people to see the actual value.
That's what I was curious about. So they can kind of see where they are, like it's the priority queue. Right?
Yeah, ironically, that task is really low in our backlog because we work on these like really important things, right? Because we're trying to keep the team really, really focused. And we know that's the thing. So like we do account for time to do this once a quarter, but try to increase the visibility on some of this stuff. Because it's not really important of getting the things done, but it is important for the health of the data.
Like I've run a process like this where people know where they are in line, and they kind of ask me, so how long is this going to take? And you can be like, well, like they all take a different amount of time.
No, you just give them an honest answer. You like give them the most honest answer you can. And that's it.
Which is I don't know.
Yeah, you just tell them, look, I actually don't know. We're working on this big, meaty project. So far, it looks like we're either running on time or behind, right? Like this is gonna take X amount of time, and there's other things. Like if they agree that their thing is not as important as yours, they will find a way to get it done through some other means. It won't be by you, it'll be by someone else. And that's okay too, right? That's just what happens.
My issue was people like, oh well, it's gonna take 14 weeks or something. And you're like, build that in the roadmap and it's not, you know, it's like, oh, I should have just done this myself.
Remember, be really clear when you're communicating, right? Like this is not a guarantee. This is when we're gonna begin intake. right? This is not a commitment on any time, right? So when you switch to this process, all deals are broken, right? Like just be very upfront with that. Everything, all promises made before this transition are basically broken because we as a team, as a company, and this only works, remember, if you have the buy-in, have decided that this is an actual priority for the company. And every company eventually needs to do this, whether it's by you or someone else. So it's really fun if you guys are the ones doing it. Because if you are at an enterprise level kind of company, they probably already have this in play, but you still build these like mini data warehouses and enterprise like models inside like these subsidiaries or your own little apartments. And if you're in a startup, your ultimate goal is to go public, right? Like you need to have hardened data at some point. So this has to be done. The earlier, the better. But there is a caveat. If your startup is in this weird zone where the stuff is like working already, it's kind of shitty, but like whatever, gets the job done. And you're almost at a point where you guys are gonna go raise money, then that's fine. Just accept that tech debt. And then when you raise money, you can kind of sweep it underneath the rug and just like do a large kind of tech debt. Like you do need to be strategic about this. So then in the meantime, maybe just work on delivering high quality like data products, like lower your volume intake. So then you can build this relationship. So when the time comes, you have the ammunition to really go out and build this. Because every company needs a data pipe. Like at worst, you need a really ugly wide table inside of Google Sheets. There's like no way around it. You just need to have some kind of agreed upon way to look at your data, right? And smaller companies will not have a data governance council, right? They're not going to have a data governance like function. So it just needs to be done in a very ad hoc way. And the easiest way to get people to agree is this kind of ugly wide table in Google Sheets that largely people agree upon and are willing to build on. Oh, cool. Hi.
Well, give a round of applause. There'll be time like to hang out and ask questions. I just want to make sure people had time to socialize. So you can ask Ian and Jason any follow-up questions if we weren't able to get to it. So just the last thing before we can start networking and hanging out again. Because I did host the event, I am legally allowed to say that we are hiring data engineers and data engineering managers at Snapcommerce, and we build on the modern data stack. We're doing a lot of cool things. So if you're interested at all, you know where to reach me. Just find me on LinkedIn or just email me at Jonathan@Snapcommerce, or just apply directly to the website. And yeah, definitely love to chat. About working here or about anything really. So finally, we really wanted to collect feedback as well for this event. We have a Google form here. So if you whip out your phone, and which you can do right now, you could whip out your phone right now and you could scan this QR code, and this will give you a little survey on how the event went and what you'd like to see in future iterations. So we would really love to get your feedback here. So yeah, I think for now we have time. Like we can hang out and drink some more. Oh yeah. Next one, so a lot of interest, I mean, no guarantees. I'm not making a guarantee, no promises, right? I have to say I don't know, but probably in another month or two, I think. It sounds like people are interested. Cool, so I think what we could do is maybe clear the chairs to the side, because I don't know if you guys have noticed, but it's brutally hot in this room. And so maybe we can get some more breathing room and just move the chairs somewhere and open up the area. So yeah, thanks.